Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. I am joined, as you can see, by my colleague, Parker Gabriel, after it is now a Broncos victory Monday. But, man, it was greasy. We are going to get into that because it was only their biggest game at home since the AFC Championship that advanced them to Super Bowl 50. And they spent the better part of 3 quarters absolutely urinating down their own leg. I'm thinking, oh, my word. But in the end, the Broncos won. So get a quick ad read, and then we're going to jump in with Parker to talk about the Broncos achieving history yesterday. We'll talk about that and what lies ahead. It's a quick turnaround. Chargers on Thursday night, and not sure if Pat Surtain is going to be available. We're going to get it to all of that after the break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggett Injury Law a call. Their motto, with us, it's personal. That's because it is. I've known Darby Hoggett for years. We became good friends traveling the country watching our boys play baseball. He told me to do the Broncos pod. I'm so glad he did. Listen, with Darby, you don't even have to pay him up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been hurt in a car wreck or injured at work, give Darby a call. That number, 1-833-HOGGET. That's 1-HOGGATT, or visit the website at hoggettlaw.com. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college hoops, NHL, and even UFC. Head to BetOnline today. Don't forget to use this promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV. That's BELIEVE for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joined back by Parker Gabriel. Well, Parker, I thought the season was going to end right here on Monday with a loss to the Colts. But in the end, 31-13 victory. They benefit from the Colts' just sheer stupidity. But I just want to get your initial reaction to it because I wrote a column on Sunday. Sean Payton was going to be up to the challenge. There's no way he was going to let the Broncos lose. And in the end, that was the result. But I don't know that they've played this bad offensively since Seattle or Pittsburgh. And the nature in which they won clearly is not sustainable. But your overall reaction to crossing the finish line and making history, at least minor history, their first winning season since 2016. So at least that stain is now bleached out of the product.
Yeah, it sure is. And I mean, I think generally speaking, and I thought your column took this tone overall and our coverage took this tone overall last night at the Post. Like, I think generally speaking, you chalk it up to by any means necessary. Like, it's like the way Bo Nix played, you can't win that way. Certainly you're not going to win in the postseason that way. You'll have a hard time winning any of your last 3 games playing that way. But I think the other side of that coin is he hasn't really played that way since the first 2 weeks of the season. The one thing I would say is they really hit their stride for a few weeks, and then he played fine against Cleveland, but he did throw 2 picks in that Monday night game before the bye week. Now he's thrown 3 coming out of the bye week, 5 in the last 2 games. That's not hey, the sky's falling, but that is something to file away because they made most of their hay this year not turning the ball over and not taking sacks. And now the last 2 weeks, they've turned the ball over and he's taken some sacks, and they've gotten away with that because their defense is on a turnover binge. And because they've still made some plays offensively. But yeah, like, I think we want to go back like a notch or 2 toward boring for this offense to sort of be like where it's best at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. It just looked like Sean Payton in some of these big moments, the gravitational pull to throw the football is so strong for him.
Yeah.
And it feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy, Parker. You and I sit next to each other for people who are familiar. We sit next to each other during the game, so some of this is ongoing dialogue. But when you rush Jaleel McLaughlin and you rush Javonte Williams, it's like, well, we can't run, so we have to pass. And it's like you pass because you can't run, but you need to run so you can pass better. And they get caught in this kind of chicken and the egg thing. And for me, the solution is, well, try different types of runs. Like, it just feels like with the run game, let's see how boring we can be and not succeed so I can pass. And I don't know what the dropbacks ended up, but between sacks and Bo's rushes, and there was a couple of kneel downs, but it was roughly around 40, right?
Yeah.
In dropbacks. And you had rushes of around 18. Like, you can't have a 2-to-1 pass to run ratio. That's almost identical to what we saw at Seattle and Pittsburgh. When Bo has played his worst, that ratio is involved. And to Parker's point, folks, if you're not know the stats, during the 10-game stretch, if memory serves, Parker, he had two picks.
Yeah.
And now in the last 2 games, he has 5.
Right.
So it's not alarming like, oh, my God, he's spiraling. I do think, Parker, it's a reminder of how they need to run the offense, isn't it? And how they need to, I don't know if it's pump the brakes or let's get, I mean, maybe some of it was the bye week feeling themselves. But isn't this some of this schematic with Bo that they can pull the reins in a little?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, honestly, like, one of the things, and this happens with any young player, like you sort of like unlock the next achievement, right? And then there's a new set of challenges that hits you almost immediately in the NFL. That's magnified for a quarterback. And on a couple of the, like against, I think the thing that's been different the last 2 weeks against last 2 games against Cleveland and then against the Colts, there have been a few moments where it looked to me, and I don't know exactly what the play call is and what the progression is and all that, but it's the first time I've really got the sense that maybe Bo is trying to do too much, trying to make too big of a play. And I do think that that's like a natural, you start feeling good, you start getting comfortable, you want to like push the envelope and be like, okay, I didn't hit this one, I'm going to hit it next time. And then maybe the next time's not the time you should actually be trying to hit it. And so like, that to me, like there's maybe a little bit of that going on. Sean Payton quick to take the, sort of the brunt of the blame after the game last night. And like, I think that that's fair too. There was sort of a perfect distillation of this. Sean told the CBS broadcast coming out of halftime that they couldn't be one dimensional and they needed to be more efficient running the ball. They started the third quarter with the ball and they threw it 4 times in a row, the last of which was an ugly interception. So like, it just, he's got to, protect the better angels sometimes and actually stick to that. And at the same time, like, end of the day, they find a way to win. They're 9-5. They just need a win to clinch a playoff spot. Like, it's clearly not all bad, but these are the types of things that could decide a wild card game or could be the difference of whether they make clinching look easy and try to move up the table a little bit in the AFC, or if they make it difficult on themselves over the next couple weeks.
And people, I understand Broncos country, and you're the best. I picked him to win 6 games.
Yeah.
Parker was around that number, so you're like, he feels like, I got some emails today. You're being overly critical. Didn't he throw 3 touchdowns? And it's like, I agree, but obviously, if you think Bo played well, you didn't watch the game.
Right.
That's where statistics lie. Like, he had 3 touchdowns. He did not play well, by his own admission.
He had 3 picks too. I mean, like if you want to use 3 touchdowns, well, yeah, he threw 3 interceptions too, and threw for 130 yards.
And exactly. And if Jonathan Taylor doesn't, that's one of the dumbest plays I've ever seen in my life in person. Yeah. If he doesn't drop the ball at the goal line, the Colts are going to go up 20-7. It feels like they're winning that game. The crowd, literally, the volume went to mute. Like, this is like, oh my God, sorry, old Broncos again. Here we go. So Bo didn't play well. It happens. And we'll leave it on this with their offense. And then we want to move on to the more enjoyable part of Nik the Quick Bonitto and get into the Pat Surtain equation here. The run game remains perplexing to me because last year they ran the ball better than they protected the quarterback. Sean Payton will say a lot of that in terms of the sacks is on Russell Wilson. That's fair. I mean, that's how he evaluates it. There's no way they can be this bad running the ball. And the Colts defense came in 31st in the league. Everyone ran on them except like a city council candidate. Like, what are we doing? How could you not run on this team? And it was just, and again, Jaleel doesn't break tackles. He's got great speed, but he's not breaking tackles. And Javonte, the last 3 games now, has 18 carries and 16 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the equivalent to me, and it always goes back to baseball for me, and I apologize for those who don't follow baseball like this. But if you're batting your cleanup hitter, you're hitting a guy 4-hole, Parker, who's hitting 100.
Yeah. And
striking out. Like, at some point, I can't hit you there in the lineup because you keep coming up when I need you with guys on base. Like, if you're hitting 9-hole like that and you got a great glove, I can probably reconcile it. But I can't have you come up every time. And it's just, I don't understand with Estime. And then Estime goes in, he gets 6 yards, and then we don't see him again. So, and then boom, out. So what is the answer? Because I joke that I'm on this Gilligan's Island with Estime. And it's not that I love the guy. basically think you need to try something different.
Right.
What is the answer with the run game? Is it up front, or maybe am I too critical on Javonte and Jalil, and it's just these linemen aren't winning? But they can't be this bad running the football if they're going to win in the rest of these games. Like, there's no way you're going to beat the Chargers, Bengals, Chiefs.
Right.
It's a one-dimensional offense. They don't have the weapons for that.
Yeah, no, they don't. And I don't think you are being too critical. I think Javonte, like, there was a resurgence there in the middle of the season where he looked really good, and he was up, I think, 4 or 5 game stretch where he was over 5 yards a carry, and it just hasn't been that way since then. The last 3 have now been sort of like particularly brutal, but just like in general, the burst you see it in spots, but not consistently, I think is the fair way to put it. And then with Jalil, like, Jalil was really good against Cleveland. He had, I think, 14 carries for 84. He's doing a little bit more. Sean Payton talked about this last week. Like, he's even though he looks like a guy that should catch a lot of passes, he wasn't like a natural pass catcher coming out of college. He's worked on that. He's gotten better at it. But he hasn't shown that he's an every down back in the NFL. That's just sort of what it is. And so that leaves Estime. We just haven't, for whatever reason, I think pass protection plays a part of it. They really trust, Javonte is one of the better pass protectors at running back that you'll find. And I think if you look at Sean Payton, like we just mentioned it a little bit, but like, look at finally sort of like deciding, yes, we're going to pay Garrett Bowles. Look at the way he talks about, if you don't take sacks and you don't turn the ball over, you're going to be efficient on offense. Like, Sean is wired, and the modern NFL game is wired around throwing the ball. And so, like, I think that the value that Sean Payton and the offensive staff see in Javonte Williams almost never missing a blitz pickup is probably a lot greater in their eyes than what your average fan thinks the value of that is. And like, simultaneously, it's like, listen, like, every time 23 goes in the game, he plows, he creates his own yardage. He's quick. He's explosive. He's young. Like, I'll be surprised if we don't see another run at him, getting real work over the last 3 games. But like, also, I've been surprised that we haven't seen it already. So it's one of those where it's like Sean Payton keeps saying they want to see more of them, and we keep not seeing more of them. And at some point, it's just like actions sort of speak louder than words on that eventually.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the Mims situation. And Mims was even more productive early last season. We kept like, oh, Mims is going to explode. And then, like, he just disappeared.
Yeah.
He was great early, and then he disappeared. And you get to the point you just stop asking. And it's interesting, Parker, you bring up, like, and they love him in pass pro. Everyone I've talked to him about, behind the scenes, oh, he's so great in pass pro. And he is. But you're in pass pro more because he's getting 1 and 2 yards on first and second down. It's like, it just feels like you're leading yourself into this 3rd and 8 because he got 1 yard on first down and 1 yard on second down. You wouldn't have to have a back grade at pass pro if you were 3rd and 2, if you were 3rd and 3. And so it's like, that's, to me, is the equation here. It's like, I get what you're saying. I really do. But it's like you're purposely creating this element to need him for pass pro by continuing to run him. And with Estime, I get it. It only takes 1 missed block, blindside, Bo fumbles, gets hurt. Like, I do understand it. And the problem, though, is when obvious run downs,
right,
there's got to be a point where, Estime gets 1 of those carries. I get he can't get first and second, Javonte third, probably, because then every time he's running, you're going to have to throw him the ball. You're going to have to do something, or it's a tell. We saw that with Philip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon a couple of years ago, that every time Philip came in the game, he's running and his yards per carry was like 2.1.
Yeah, and Jalil last year too. I mean, they got in that with Jalil last year. But like, his touch rate when he was in the game was like 70%.
Oh, 38's in.
Yeah, he's in. 38's in. He's getting the ball. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like youth football. Here comes the fastest kid. He's getting the ball. Right. So there's some of that. And listen, Sean Payton has done it at a high level for literally the 16, 17 years as an NFL head coach. It's just my eyes are telling me they got to tweak something, because you're going to have to win a rock fight against the Chargers. You're going to have to win a rock fight. Now, I'm not even sure what happened. I've only seen the highlights of that Chargers-Bucks game, but the Chargers were only allowing like 16 points a game. They had the best defense in the league and got absolutely their ears boxed at home. Maybe it's coming off the tough loss to the Chiefs. I don't know. But Parker, let's talk before we get in. I want to talk because we need to understand they have a winning season.
Yep.
They're the right now the Broncos would be a 6 seed playing the Steelers, which we all love. We love this game. They don't get there without Nik Bonitto. Is he in the defensive player of the year conversation? I've seen a lot of great plays. Covered Von Miller in his prime. And a couple of the weeks and some of the things Nik Bonitto has done, he's conjuring images of Elvis Dumervil and Von Miller. I mean, is he in that conversation? And just take me through what your eyes told you on that throwback play, which technically was ruled a fumble recovery.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever seen a linebacker make a play like that. I'm sure it's happened. I'm just saying with my own eyes, I haven't seen it.
No, yeah, same, 100%. I think what your eyes tell you about that play is like, what on earth were the Colts thinking? First of all, but it's an incredible play by Nik Bonitto, and he's been on a super run, and I do think he's in the defensive player of the year conversation. I don't know that you'd make him the favorite. A lot of times, a guy has to have a breakout year before, it's like the year before the year kind of to put you fully on the radar. But if he keeps doing this, he's not going to end up. He could, but he's not going to end up in that like 18 sack range. But he's right near the top of the NFL leaderboard in that. He's got 11.5 now. And the thing about it is the 2 touchdowns. I mean, when you're making splash plays like that, and when they come on, one of them comes on Monday Night Football, the notoriety that comes with that, right, wrong, or indifferent, it matters, especially when it comes to big awards. And so, you hear Broncos players across the locker room last night saying, show me somebody that has a better resume. Now, I could say, okay, well, Danielle Hunter in Houston has, double the pressures almost that Nik Bonitto has this year, but they're about even in sacks, and Nick scored 2 touchdowns. And, TJ Watt's obviously a great player. I mean, Pat Surtain is probably not going to win defensive player of the year, but like for my money should be at least in the conversation. There's great defensive players all over the league, but Nick is having a special year, a breakout year, a year that's going to make him a very rich man. And on top of that, one that has come with the kind of big plays that like your casual viewer and your award voter, it's easy to remember him snatching a ball at midfield on the logo and going 50 or going 71 or whatever it is, And so that stuff, like, and both of those like tilted games. And so
right.
when you, and then not only that, but, he had the strip sack against the Browns that closed that thing out. And so those are the sort of plays, or maybe that was Vegas. I mean, like each of the last 3 games, he's just made game tilting plays. And that's the sort of thing that wins you big awards.
And I think you even said it yesterday when in the press box, like these are like Heisman moments when you're going to win a defensive player of the year. Like when you get the sack that seals the Raiders game, a pick 6 against the Browns, and then a fumble recover technically against the Colts. And that play alone, that is, you just don't see that kind of play. Right. I mean, it's not Saquon jumping over backwards over someone, but I mean, I would challenge someone to find the highlights. The last time an inside linebacker broke on a ball like that. I mean, I've watched Vaughn in coverage for years make plays in coverage, not like that. I mean, he made a play against Tom Brady in the AFC Championship where he cut in front of Gronk, but it was a typical route where he was in coverage, not reacting, sensing the culture doing arguably the dumbest play of all time outside of their fake punt several years ago. That was the dumbest play I've ever seen in my life. These next 2 might be in the top 5 with Taylor dropping the ball. And he's a great guy. Everyone loves it. And he was like going to Yale. Sean Keeler was telling me he's like this smart guy. You know him from Wisconsin. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the dumbest plays I've ever seen, followed by throwing it to a receiver who struggled to catch the ball all year by all estimation for the Colts.
Yeah.
Then he's like gripping it like a little kid.
He's like looking down for the laces. Yeah.
Oh, my God. But it doesn't discount what Bonitto did. And that's a Heisman type moment, a defensive player of the year. And I want to say this because it usually matters with voters. It doesn't have to, because some of these player of the year things can be seen in a vacuum. In baseball, they are. With football, it's never really been this way. He's doing it on a good defense on a team that's going to the playoffs.
Yep.
You could say, well, Trey Hendrickson's having a great year. Yeah, they're terrible.
Right.
Joe Burrow should be in the MVP conversation. He's not winning it this year over Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen or Saquon Barkley. And so that's why I think, Bonitto has a real shot if TJ Watt doesn't go off. I have to look at all the candidates, but like Hunter's got a shot. But Houston, I mean, their defense isn't considered great. Like he's got a real shot here, especially if these last couple of weeks let's say he gets 4 sacks in the last 3 games and he gets that number up to 15, 16. Now I think you're talking about something, Parker.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing I think that sometimes doesn't get said about Nik Bonitto, and I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, is that for all of the splash, 11.5 sacks and the touchdowns and all of that, the thing that his coaches and his teammates are the most happy with about him is the way that he's become a complete player. Like he told me that he played like a blind dog. That was his terminology when he was a rookie. Run up the field as fast as you can and try to hit something hard. And the thing about the 2 picks or the 2 return touchdowns in the last 2 games, neither of those plays get made without feel for the game and without instincts and without playing under control, because he was on the backside of that play and he sensed Anthony Richardson fading like toward him basically. And thought, okay, I'm going to make this, I might make a play here. He was dropping in coverage on the pick 6 against Cleveland. In Vegas, actually, the couple plays I talked to him about in Vegas were screens that he diagnosed and then disrupted early in that game. And so he's not only making big plays, but he's making plays that like 2 years ago, even last year, he just wouldn't have made. And it's stuff that like, not every play changes the game. And he's made plenty of those the last several weeks, but like he's doing a lot of stuff that takes coaching and it takes, dedication, and it takes attention to detail and all of that. And so he's just like, I can't even necessarily sit here and say he's the best player on their defense because Pat is just that good, but he's been maybe their second most important player, or you could argue their most valuable player this year. And he's turning himself like week by week, like legitimately into a star. And it's not something you see every day.
And to your point, it's just situational awareness. Usually when you go from good to great, that's kind of that secret sauce of situational awareness. You see it in baseball. You see it in other sports where you're not just an athlete who's better than guys. And this kid's he was one of the fastest guys at Oklahoma, like in shuttle drills as an edge rusher. Yeah. I mean, his athleticism is elite, but it's now combined with the ability to stop the edge and support the edge and situational awareness. And frankly, if he continues to play like he is, and I love Pat, I might say he's their team MVP if he ends up. I mean, if he has a chance to win, like if we're talking about the last game of the season, that he could be the defensive player of the year. With all due respect to Pat, I mean, Nik might have to be it. He can't. Sure. Pat can't be better. And I know there'll be arguments, and I usually vote Pat just out of default. But that brings up the question with Pat. Gets a great interception. I think it was a cheap shot by the receiver, but obviously if Pat had to do it over again, he would have stayed down. What are we thinking on a short week? It looks. I mean, if I had to guess, he won't be available. I mean, I don't know that. I don't have any knowledge on that. His dad tweeted last night he's tough and all that. If it was a Sunday game, I'd have a lot better feeling that he would play. Thursday night with 2 other games, they're going to need him, especially at the Bengals. What do they do? Where does it stand with Surtain? What is your kind of educated guess? And where do they go? What does that look like if he can't play? Because Moss likely, by all indications, he's probably not going to be back till Cincinnati.
Yeah. I think with Riley, like we saw him work out on the field a couple hours before the game, and it just, maybe they just didn't want him at full speed then, but it definitely was not. And so if that's sort of like where they're at with him, he didn't look like a guy 4 days away from playing. Now, short week, it's a big game. Guys are super competitive. They're tough. They want to try to play. We'll see about that. But like, that's what that looked like with Pat. To me, it didn't look that bad. It looked bad, but he got off the field okay. Then he came back in, and then he went down after he made a tackle on the sideline again. He was pretty ginger coming off the field. After the game, he didn't talk in the locker room. We asked. They said, well, he didn't finish the game, so he's not available. He didn't have crutches or anything. He had his ankle taped up. He walked out and he looked okay. But, looking okay walking out in regular shoes is a lot different than playing at a high level in an NFL game. So I tend to agree with you. I think if it was a Sunday, I wouldn't have a whole lot of doubt about it. Maybe it'll be fine. I mean, sometimes with that, ankle sprain kind of thing, it just depends on how you bounce back the next day and what the swelling looks like and all of that. And so, they can't make the decision because Riley Moss is out too. He's one of the best players in football. You just gotta go where it takes you. And obviously, Pat's a tough guy. He'll try to get it in shape. And if he doesn't, then it's going to be Damari Mathis and Chris Abrams-Drain probably. I mean, Abrams Drain really played pretty well.
Yeah, Dre played it out of his mind, but
Mathis's first start was at SoFi, I think, when he was a rookie in 22, and he got called for the 4 DPI penalties. Yeah, so
played pretty well after that game for a long stretch, but yeah, he had a tough night. Some of those were questionable, but yeah, I think it was 3 or 4 penalties that night.
Yeah, so he'll have the psychological blocker to get over if he's back in the lineup at SoFi. But I thought like Damari, like he really played well as a rookie after that, and then he struggled and eventually got benched last year. I think he's been pretty good so far this season. He hasn't played a lot, but he's played in sub stuff. They've trusted him in some big spots, and I thought both of those guys played pretty well. Obviously, if those two start on Thursday night, it's a different conversation than if it's Pat Surtain and Riley Moss, who are one of the better 1-2 duos in football over most of the season. But that's a position where they have real depth, and I think for as good as the rookie class has been, like the last couple of weeks, it looks like they found another guy with Chris Abrams-Drain.
Yeah, and crap tip to Ryan McFadden. He loved Abrams-Drain coming out of the draft. He thought he was a guy, and he was as surprised at anyone. He wasn't getting on the field. Some of it's role related. Some of it's, we don't see practice once the season starts. Totally. But, cap tip to Ryan because he was all over that pick, loved that pick. And the kids did nothing but ball out. He got sent into that Cleveland game with the alarms blaring. Wallace had grill marks on his jersey, and they needed someone to put out the fire, and he played well. That, to the point where Wallace was inactive. I would think Wallace will probably be active now if Pat can't play, because you got to have a safety net there. They catch somewhat of a break because the Chargers' pass game's not great.
Yeah,
not great. It's basically Ladd McConkey and like 2 other dudes that drop balls all the time. I mean, McConkey's really good, but if Jaquan McMillan can guard him in the slot, maybe you got something there. If this was the lineup they were rolling out against the Bengals, the next week I'd be like, okay,
yeah,
they might have to win 42-40.
Yeah, and Sean doesn't like and Ryan asked him a good question last night after the game about, was there any conversation about Pat not going back in the game after he came out, and Sean, he's adamant about this all the time. He says it's all about if a guy gets cleared. If a guy gets cleared, he's going back in the game. Which, listen, like you can quibble with that, like. He said there's really no other way to handle it. Like one other way to handle it would have been to not put your all pro back in when you're leading by 3 scores after he hurt his ankle. But I understand but I do understand what he's saying. And so a lot of it is going to just be strictly about whether, Pat's cleared. They're not going to do this thing where it's like, let's just sit him and have him be healthy for Cincinnati. That's not the way Sean Payton thinks.
Yeah, he doesn't work like that.
NFL teams operate typically. And so it really will just be about how fast he bounces back. But yeah, like if you could have Pat Surtain and Riley Moss both back right away, obviously you would take it, and you really want them playing against Cincinnati and Kansas City down the stretch.
And you made a great point. In baseball, I used to talk to people about this all the time. You've got to let the symptoms dictate where you go. Don't let someone else's injury increase or accelerate somebody else's timetable.
Right.
It's not fair to the player. Treat his injury in a vacuum. And usually the best training staffs do that. It's like, oh no, Moss is hurt. Surtain, you gotta be healthier. Well,
can you give us one? No, that's not really.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't really work that way. That's where you get into trouble. And it really depends. And we don't know. Is it a high ankle sprain? Is it a low ankle sprain? I mean, and while Sean Payton, I think it's an easy out to just say if he's healthy, he goes back in. Patrick Mahomes stayed out of the game yesterday. I mean, I watched the interview. He's like,
game, not a 3-score game.
And he was just like, it made no sense for me to go back in. We got Carson Wentz. There are points, and this conversation comes up with the Nuggets all the time with Jokic. When you're up 32 with 4 minutes left, and the other team goes on an 8-0 run, you don't need to put Jokic back in. Like you're up 24 now. Like there's times as a coach, you can overrule the trainer and say, no, you stay over there. And the irony is they do that in the preseason. Pat doesn't play in the preseason either for this reason. He's too valuable. But I respect the players. I will go back in and be with my guys. Yep. So I'm not going to be that guy and say, why does he go in? These people, folks, they're type A personalities.
Yeah.
This is who they are.
Yeah. Pat's not sitting on the sideline going, I think I'm good.
Yeah. He wants to be out there with his guys. They have a winning season. I mean, all these guys that have lived this the last 3, 4, 5 years, they want to enjoy this. Yeah. I mean, this is what they've all been waiting for. You don't want to be like, oh, my ankle. I mean, he wants to be out there with his guys. I hope that the second time he went down, it was just kind of the pain shooting in as a reminder of his body saying, you know what, sit, not a re-injury. And when I watched it again, it didn't look like a re-injury as much as, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, to just sit here because I think maybe his body was reminding him you could really hurt something here if you're not careful.
Yeah, I think so. And he kind of like, he knocked the guy out of bounds when he went down the second time. And maybe, you plant your foot to hit somebody, and maybe he just felt it again on that. It didn't look like it rolled. Ankles can be, and Pat's had, minor ankle issues here and there over the last couple of years too. So it's something he's dealt with before. And it happens, and so I don't know. I mean, we'll get an estimate. It's Monday morning as we're recording this. We'll have an estimated injury report on a walkthrough type of day today. They'll be out there practicing tomorrow. So you'll have a decent idea of whether, he wants to try to push through and play. I wouldn't, this is a cop out, but I guess I just wouldn't be surprised either way. It looked like, if it was a playoff game and it was Thursday night, I would be sitting here saying, yeah, some way, somehow he'll find his way out there. But it is a tight turnaround for these guys. I think sometimes it gets underestimated how little preparation time, how little recovery time there is between, wrapping up at 5:30 on Sunday night and then getting on the plane on Wednesday afternoon to go to LA.
Yeah, it's tough. And we'll fit with that because I won't have a traditional preview episode. So and not to make a prediction as much as quickly, Parker, what do you see as the keys? When the Chargers were here earlier this season, they dominated the Broncos. Yeah. I think it was 23-0 at half, if I remember. And the Broncos, and it was every bit of 23-0. The Chargers defense yesterday notwithstanding, they're nasty. I mean, They get after it. They're a Jim Harbaugh defense. Derwin James has found his stride under Harbaugh. What kind of game do you think it has to be? What kind of game do you see unfolding, especially if the Broncos were to win?
Yeah, not that you can't turn the ball over 3 times. That's for sure. And I think it's just like they got caught on their heels for a half, basically. Interestingly enough, like after Pat Surtain went down on the first play of that game, had the concussion. And so I think you just have to, you got to be ready to rumble, like that's a team that's going to smack you. And if you can stand up to that, then you can play with them. We saw Tampa, break the floodgates open kind of, and teams have got them, Kansas City's got them in close games. Like they're not infallible, obviously, but they're tough. And so you've got to stand toe to toe with them. I think you have to run the football, and you can't, Indianapolis ran the ball at them early in the game on Sunday. You can't let the run game get going because if Jim Harbaugh it's like he takes joy in nothing more than just, having the ball for 19 minutes in the first half. And if you let them do that, like they will happily do that and then walk, 13-10. Okay, see you later. That's a W. That's kind of how they're wired. And so you have to be willing to win that way, probably in order to go there and win in prime time in a game that could not only clinch you a playoff spot, but also put you in the driver's seat to finish ahead of LA in the standings and maybe be in the 6-3 or even in contention for the 5-4 line.
It is crazy. They've exceeded expectations. They get a win. The offense can't feel good about it, but ultimately they found a way to win. Yep. Justin Herbert's better than Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson made Tim Tebow look more accurate than a DNA test. I have never seen a quarterback look that bad in terms of passing the football. I mean, it's just at the NFL level, you just don't see it where he throws a dart and the next one's 25 yards over the guy who's open. So Herbert protects the ball. Herbert's harder to sack. I agree with you. It's going to be a rock fight. It's got to throw down the sawdust. These are the kind of games that you find out how tough you are. And it's going to come down to the O-line, D-line. Whoever wins at the point of attack is going to win this game. And obviously Bo can't turn the ball over. He's got to shake that. And I think he will, given how he's responded to adversity. He hasn't necessarily responded great to in-game adversity. He's generally responded game to game. So we'll see if he can continue to do that. Folks, I could not do this pod without Darby Hoggett of Hoggett Injury Law, Nate Lundy of Mile High Sports, my guy behind the screen, the big A who produces this. He is the best. Broncos country, I do this pod for you and for Parker Gabriel. But happiness, that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.